So we are here to talk about Wolfenstein II, the new Colossus, which for anyone that is listening to the show or unfamiliar with Game Informer, maybe a first-time listener, Javy hates Wolfenstein games.
Oh, it's the worst.
I mean, like, he doesn't over-obsess on them. He hasn't written like 5 or 6 think pieces on them on the website.
Absolutely not.
He's not.
I wish we knew his take on this franchise.
I mean, I really, it's tough. It's tough. It's
I'm a man of mystery when it comes to
It's like
Wolfenstein.
reading a blank page, truly, when it comes to Wolfenstein.
Yeah.
That's sarcasm for everyone who doesn't get sarcasm out there. Just to be clear. We know that he loves the wolf, and Javy actually has been. I remember. I think when I walked up around E3 when they put up the first trailer, the look on your face was like kind of a permanent grin, and I just laughed because he was so excited, and you could see it then. So finally, and it was funny. Oh, we're gonna get the game in late. I don't know. Will someone be able to get it done in deadline? And Javy's like, I got it. So you've been playing the I'm sure the hell out of Wolfenstein the last couple days. Tell us about it.
Well, I went in with pretty high expectations because I do love Wolfenstein a lot, and I like the New Order a lot. But the New Order is a very flawed game. It has serious pacing issues and some really confusing puzzle gameplay and fetch quest stuff that doesn't need to be there.
Yeah.
So I was kind of worried about that, and also it has like. My favorite thing about the New Order is I think it has a perfect ending, and so a sequel, you get sort of nervous about, they're going to mess with that.
Yeah.
So I went into it with high expectations, but also a lot of concerns about the ambition because they had pitched this to the public as like a road trip through America where you're killing Nazis. Basically, like The Last of Us, but with Nazis instead of zombies.
Yes.
Was sort of their whole pitch. But I love this game. Like I played through it in about 14 hours. I didn't do it all in one sitting, but like across 2 sittings and just the entire time, every sequence. And you start the game. We can talk a little bit about the first level since that's not too spoilery. You start the game in a wheelchair.
I played this level.
Yeah, and you kill Nazis in a U-boat while in a wheelchair. And from there, the game only gets zanier. Not to go too much into spoilers, but at like one point you're infiltrating an airship. At another point you're riding a giant metal wolf through the streets of New Orleans, lighting Nazis on fire. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's just crazy all the way through, and it's got a lot of variety, which I love. Like I love first-person shooters with variety.
Yeah.
I don't like, because to me a first-person shooter is an act of like creating an illusion for repetition because you're killing things. And all first-person shooters, shooting guns over and over and over again. And so much of the strength of a first-person shooter, especially modern first-person shooters, relies on, okay, how well can we cover this up in a particular context or make it seem interesting? Titanfall 2 did a really good job of that.
Yeah.
Like, it was constantly, like, requiring you to do other things than kill other people or, like, just, it was very arcadey and fun. And Wolfenstein 2 does sort of the same kind of illusion. Like you are killing Nazis all the way through, but the gameplay is flexible. Like you can use like stealth, or you can go all in Arnold Schwarzenegger style with like dual wielding weapons, a shotgun in one hand and like a sniper rifle in the other if you want. And the story is just beautiful. It's one of the best stories I've ever seen in a game, and it also because it's a very
okay. Hold on, I gotta interrupt you. It is a beautiful, one of the best stories I've ever seen in a game. Okay, at the same time you say, which I assume because I've seen the first game. I mean, part of the reason why the first game is fun is that you're just like, what the hell is going on here? Why is this guy living in this attic? What is, just, it's weird.
Right. Oh, it's a weird game.
You're like, none of this makes sense. Okay, we're doing this, but it's fun and done. And like you said, the parts around it, the context are fun and interesting, right, in most ways. Like, it's like, okay, I know I'm going to get in a mech on this level. I'm going back to the original one. You're like, okay, the way I got in this mech was pretty hilarious and pretty ingenious the way they got you there, right? But to say the story is that's a pretty bold statement.
Right, and I don't feel that way about the New Order. Like, I really like the story in the New Order, but the problem with the New Order was that it would introduce this memorable cast of characters, and you'd get, like, 20 seconds with them.
Yeah.
What the new Colossus does is it takes that sort of hub world in between missions that was in the original game and expands it and makes it feel much more like the Normandy in Mass Effect 2.
Okay.
So you get a lot of time there to interact with characters, and like you get every character, all side characters, and you get to talk with them and find out what their stakes are in this and like the traumas they've been through. And like you get to see them during good times and bad times. Like it feels like a 50 like an even split between like, okay, I'm running around in missions killing Nazis for like whatever reason, for whatever my objective is, and then I'm back on the ship. It's the U-boat. I'm back on the U-boat interacting with these people and finding out who they are, and it's like deeply moving sort of conversations about racism, about faith, about white supremacy, about all these like very complicated things. And like, you know, BJ's wife is pregnant and they're worried about having twins in this world. Like it goes to some despairing places, but also like there's some sequences that are just hilarious that are reminiscent of like Saints Row sort of stuff, where it's just like, okay, cool. We're all getting drunk and having a blast and people are getting into shenanigans. It's very good.
This seems all over the place. You say
It's
no.
The greatest story I've ever heard also has a lot of things like Saint Row. Is there?
No.
It's like it's an interesting reflection of humanity. And you punch Nazis.
Yeah, no. But
how much is it? How much of it is like BJ Blazkowicz sort of monologuing? Because that was a part of it. Because he'd walk out and it's like, oh, the rain. You can't escape getting wet. It's
there's still some monologuing, but most of the story interactions are between characters. And BJ actually talks more in the original game, or I hate saying the original game because it's not the original game, but in the New Order, he did have that thing where it's like, you know, like I'm a poet.
Yeah.
And he'd just like say dumb shit like that. Right. But here he talks a lot more with characters like constantly. Like he's not like sort of this, he actually becomes a character. He's not like a caricature from a leftover time. Like you get to explore his history, like growing up as like an abused child and stuff. So it's very interesting. And tone-wise, I was kind of concerned about that when I was playing, but in the end I felt like just how despairing it is, it's necessary to have some of that light in. So like those things mix really well together. Like in other games, I feel like they would mix about as well as oil and water do, but because of the writing and the earnesty behind it, behind like what the characters are saying and what their situations are in, it's just, it works. It really works. It's one of those prototypical like, oh, this shouldn't work, but it does.
It does work.
Yeah.
Huh, all right. Well, I mean, that I mean, I definitely felt that in the first game there were moments where you're like, this is saying something interesting,
right,
bigger than itself, and it does do that.
Right.
I just didn't. I guess I'm still kind of confused. I mean, I get it's bigger, better. I like the idea of a larger U-boat, a bigger hub. The hub was fun. It was interesting, and just to see what would happen, you'd be like, oh, I bet I can sleep. Yeah, maybe I'll sleep one more time just to see what see what happens, how the world reacts. So I find that fascinating, but how is the game itself, I mean, really any different, right? I mean, I think they went kind of more extreme with like Doom. I mean, obviously I'm a big fan of the previous Doom kind of remake. Mm-hmm. What have they done to make the game more interesting as far as like the gameplay, other than, you know, put you in a wheelchair, things like that? What has moved that forward?
They've beefed up the actual like run and gunplay, because the New Order, like, it was pretty simplistic. Like you just run around, shoot Nazis, and you could also stealth your way through, you know, some of the game, not all of the game. Yeah. So they've amplified all of that. Like you can dual wield any weapon together now. So if you want a shotgun in one hand and a sniper rifle in another, why not?
What do you need?
Yeah, exactly. Tools for all occasions. They've expanded. There was this perk system in the original game where you would get like stat boost for killing Nazis in certain creative ways. Like, oh, if you blow up 10 Nazis, you get more grenades.
Yeah.
And they've expanded that in interesting ways. There's more of that, and it was super satisfying to see that sort of progression thing go up in an RPG sort of sense. I'm getting closer. But there's also weapon modifications, which is super cool. So like there are weapon kits through every level in the game, and they basically act as like skill points for your for like any weapon in your arsenal. And none of the weapons are gated. So from the get-go, you can decide like, okay, I've got some weapon kits. Do I want to go loud? Do I want to make my machine guns more powerful? Do I want them to fire rounds that are, you know, hit harder? Or maybe I want to put silencers on my weapons or scopes.
Okay, yeah, just kind of modifying the gameplay across it.
Yeah, so, you know, you can approach situations pretty much however you want to, and like there's more flexibility here.
I mean, it's no Dishonored.
No, it's no Dishonored. Like, you're still killing Nazis.
Yeah.
But within that box, like, it does super cool things. Like, for example, again, it's no Dishonored, but there were entire sections and levels where I snuck past Nazis and like kill a single one. Whereas in the New Order...
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Just to double check.
Yeah, and the New Order in the Old Blood, I'm not going crazy. You had to basically kill every Nazi you came across. Like, that sort of got in the way because the origins of Wolfenstein is that it was actually an infiltration adventure game until id Software got a hold of it. So, that sort of ties back into that where it's like, oh, I can sort of treat this as a sneaking mission in ways, which is really cool. And there's also, I don't want to go too into this because it taps into spoiler stories, but there's also about halfway through the game, you get access to superpowers.
Okay.
That are they're so cool, and I don't want to talk about them because of how cool they are. It's one of those things that you need to discover for yourself, but they give you more options in combat. Also let you reach like secret places that you can't with the other powers. So
Gotcha.
It adds a lot of replayability. And there's also the alternate timeline stuff that was in the first game. For those who didn't play it, you make a choice at the beginning of the New Order, and whatever choice you make creates an alternate timeline where one character lives and one character dies. And there's so much that happens. Like it's not huge stuff, but like you get access to different bonuses. Like in one timeline, you get access to something that can give you more armor, like 150 armor versus 100 or health. You get access to different cutscenes and different characters, and some levels are even completely changed. Like there's a prison breakout level where if you choose one character, it's a shootout all the way out. If you choose another character, you guys sneak out. And it's that sort of stuff. They've expanded that in this one, where depending on, and you at the beginning of the game, you get to choose which timeline that BJ chose in the first game. So it's not a carryover save situation, so you don't have to worry about that. So you can, depending on which character you choose, you get access to an entirely new weapon. Obviously, a lot more cutscenes with different context added to them because that character will act differently. And
Did you play through this one twice already?
I played through it 1.5 times.
Okay.
Yeah, so like there are huge differences that are worth noting. And then, you get, there's also like beyond the story missions themselves, there are epilogue missions and like little missions that exist outside the story, sort of like additional operations you can go do that are self-contained and fun. So there's a lot of content here too. It's not just like, 12-hour story done. Like it feels honestly like to get the whole thing, it feels like it's like a 25-hour game if you choose to, but it's still, it's satisfying enough on its own if you do it once. So there's a lot here that I love.
So what I loved about you'll have to agree. I don't remember. I don't have the same depth of knowledge of Wolfenstein as yourself. But that crazy Nazi grandma lady and and her granddaughter, is it in the video?
Anya.
That is a extremely uncomfortable situation, at least for me. Maybe because I become uneasy at most things. But I assume that kind of tension is something that flares up fairly often as you kind of come to head.
Oh yeah, like there are several sequences that are super tense. Like I was sitting on the edge of my seat going, okay, this is fine. And then things weren't fine. But yeah, there's, for people who loved sort of that sequence in the train where like the Nazi has her gun on you and she's saying, making you choose pictures and is basically just messing around with your head. Sort of that Tarantino inspired thing. Like there's more of that here. But it's not too much that it overcrowds the story, because I honestly think like the least interesting thing about the New Order and the new Colossus is when Machine Games takes a page out of Tarantino's book, because it feels like sort of it's obvious when it's happening. It's like, okay, I could see this in Inglourious Bastards, because to me it's more about the storytelling about these people fighting for hope and what is fundamentally a broken world and finding it and never giving up, while also turning to each other and acknowledging like how hard that fight is and finding meaning in their relationships. Like to me, that is infinitely more interesting than like some tense sequences with some Nazis that end poorly.
This may reflect poorly on me, but I mean, like, I never got any kind of level of like self-reflection or human reflection kind of thing on a greater whole. I remembered more the Tarantino type things from the first game, because I guess I remember the ridiculous more of Wolfenstein than I do the like. I mean, it had caring moments even in the first game, right? Outside of just like, let's have sex on this like washing machine or whatever it is that kind of goes down and is like a weird moment in that first game. But I tend to remember those moments. I like those moments. I find it that even if it is cribbing from Tarantino, you know what I mean? At least maybe I'm underselling video games, but I feel like at least they're trying to be clever. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like they're trying to tell stories, and I always feel like gaming and developers are always still growing and still kind of coming into their own because it is an interactive medium and trying to make it fit.
Mhm.
But I definitely usually tend to prefer those, but I'm intrigued if I will find such hope in humanity
Well,
that
I'm
you
sure,
have.
I'm sure we can argue about it next week or
well,
whenever you play it.
I think we've argued about every game. I think either
Yeah,
you or I have played.
What was it? We argued when I took the job? Tales from the Borderlands.
Tales from the Borderlands, which I said I liked.
Yeah,
I did like.
yeah.
I did
That was
like
a good argument.
It was a
I'm
good
surprised
argument.
it didn't get fired. That was a good argument.
I was actually surprised you didn't quit. I don't want to work here. This guy is a jackass and won't shut up about Tales from the Borderlands.
But yeah, no, it's. But to be clear, I don't think those sequences, the Tarantino-esque sequences, are bad.
Yeah.
Like I think they're well constructed. I just don't think there's as interesting as the other moments because I'm more inclined to those moments. So I definitely think it's a your mileage may vary sort of thing as opposed to like these are objectively awful.
Yeah.
So yeah, but anyway, I love the game. I think it's my favorite. It's definitely my favorite shooter I've played in years. Like I like it more than Titanfall 2.
All right.
You like Titanfall 2 a
I
lot.
love Titanfall
You
2.
like Titanfall 2.
Yeah, I've got like 100 hours in Titanfall 2, but it's just this campaign. I'm in love with it.
Do you like it better than the New Order, which is in your top 10?
Oh yeah, the New Order. Like I think it's far and away a much better game than the New Order. I like the New Order, but it is rough in spots.
So is this game already in your top 10 of all time?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, like top 3. Probably moves System Shock out of the way.
Wow.
So number 3. So right below Mass Effect 2 and Half-Life.
Are you gonna have to go update your list?
Yeah,
of
probably.
your blog.
Probably. Yeah.
So what is? I mean, I think when we go back to previous conversation we had about single player games.
Mhm.
You know, we talk about to some degree. I mean, because as a first person shooter, there's always a little bit of linearity to the story and the way that it's told. I mean, certainly you can make choices, but is this game gonna sell? Are people gonna buy this? Are we gonna see? I mean, not that you can answer this question necessarily, but I want to know what you think. Are we gonna see? Is this going to vault it forward? Are we going to see a third game? Is this going to continue down the path? Can the game continue down this path of kind of a linear story that can be finished in 14 hours, can be done in 25 hours if I play it twice? Is what's there? Is that a satisfying game that's going to propel the series forward?
Well, when I talked with the creative director, like they said that straight up this is a trilogy. Like it is planned as a trilogy, and it definitely has that sort of Empire Strikes Back feeling
Gotcha.
of like, okay, this is dark and despairing in a middle chapter, and it's got a great ending that's sort of cliffhanger-ish.
Gotcha.
So like the intent is clearly there for them to continue on and make this game. As far as sales go, man, I don't know. Bethesda's had a tough time recently.
Had a tough time recently.
But I feel like
Marketing campaign's been better for this one.
yeah, I mean, well, they walked into that marketing campaign.
Yeah, they did.
Like,
Well,
it, like,
the world
fell
kind
into
of
their-
walked into their marketing campaign.
And they're
Let's
just
be
like,
honest.
what? So I feel like it has a better chance. And also just the fact that it's a first-person shooter, no bones about it. Like, even, because Dishonored...
Agreed. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
Dishonored
thinking
and
man's
Prey.
FPS kind of thing.
Yeah, which, I love this. I mean, I have a tattoo
persons.
for Dishonored, so I love that game.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
But I feel like Wolfenstein, and given the legacy behind that game, is just much more marketable than Prey, than Dishonored. So if there's any game that Bethesda's about to put out right now outside of, obviously they're juggernauts,
Yeah,
Skyrim
yeah.
and Fallout,
Yeah.
like and Doom, I feel like it's going to be Wolfenstein.
Well, I feel like Doom did really well.
Doom did really well.
I thought people were excited about Doom, and there was a lot to be excited.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think about Doom. Right?
Yeah, I'm excited. I actually replayed Doom like 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to replay it again on Switch as soon as it comes out because that game, it's a little too long in the tooth for me, but it's really good.
It
Are
is
you going to
very
play this one, Wolfenstein, when it comes out on Switch?
Yeah, as long as it can run well.
Are you going to use a Pro Controller? Or are you going to be?
Oh yeah,
using
I can't imagine using the Joy-Cons for a first-person shooter. Like Splatoon, which is third-person, works because you don't necessarily need precision with the Joy-Cons. But the idea of like playing a first-person shooter on Switch without just with the Joy-Cons is
What
weird
if
to me.
you could aim by moving?
Nope.
by tilting your
Nope, I'm out. I'm out.
Serial, you're gonna be in big trouble if you keep going down that path.
Yeah.
Because
But
no one likes that.
yeah, no one.
No one.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I mean, I hope so. I mean, I love those types of games. I sat down. I was like, I'm going to play Wolfenstein for like an hour, and I think I stayed up too late. And I woke up the next morning and like plowed through it. It was a really fun game. I didn't love the feel like the boss fight, I mean, it was good because it was hard, I guess, but the boss fight at the end of that game was like a little...
Yeah,
it wasn't that fun to just kind of repeat the same thing over and over and over. Until
I almost memorized
interesting.
the line at the beginning of that encounter of just like that, because I played it so many times. It was kind of frustrating.
Yeah, it's they've fixed that in the new Colossus for what it's worth. I never minded that final boss fight that much. I understand why people do, because it does feel like an odd thing to end on, but at the same time, thematically, it kind of works. You know, it's just like, okay, here are these two characters who have been on sort of a crash course for like 3 games now, and it feels like a testament to that old style boss fight. But it doesn't translate to modern first-person shooter as well as, you know, I'd like it to. Like Doom did a great job with that, like varying up the cyber demon and stuff, so it was more of like a patterned fight as opposed to like, all right, bullet sponge. But, you know, I don't mind it as much as other people do, where it's because it's like, okay, this works, even if it's not great.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I feel like this has been the running theme, but does it have microtransactions?
No.
Okay, well, I think it's maybe the
horse armor. It has horse armor. You can get horse armor.
Oh boy, Panzerhund armor. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Javy. I think I'm excited to play the game. I think it's amazing that it's coming out on the same day as Mario and Assassin's Creed.
I really, honestly, kind of hoped that they would have pushed it back to like, because it really does feel almost like a Titanfall 2 Battlefield 1 debacle. Except, I guess at least this time it's not the same publisher. But we'll see.
I feel like those 3 games kind of hit 3 separate, you know, sort of itches in a way that
they do. But I mean, like I've had this happen to me where I go in with the best intentions of like, all right, I'm playing Mario, I'm playing Assassin's Creed, and I'm playing Wolfenstein. And then I go home and I play one of them.
Yeah,
right.
Like it's a question of resources beyond money.
Yeah.
And these games, you know, especially those 2, Mario and Assassin's Creed, we're not talking like, oh, you're done in like 2 days.
Yeah.
Like these games are massive, especially if like you're a completionist. So I don't know. It does feel like a bad decision to release Wolfenstein like head to head, same day, those games. Just, you know, because people aren't going to A, have that much money to get all 3, and B, if they do, like the time, like where do you get the time for that?
And to bring up another thing that's on this episode of the podcast, there might be a lot of PC players playing Destiny 2 as well for the first time this week. So it is an interesting week and an interesting time, I think, for games in general, just that, you know, because this is just an interesting... I think that's an interesting thing when you talk about we have 4 great games all coming out. I mean, I've talked to no one here who's been, you know, down on any of the games that we've talked about. They're all coming out, and then we have to be concerned that maybe one of them will fail to there being too much great stuff going on.
Right, yeah. I mean, we saw that happen last year with like Gears of War and Titanfall 2, games that underperformed but came out and were like really good. They were so good, and people just didn't buy them.
Yeah. You have to be more than good. You have to be more than good.
Yeah, it's not enough. I had this buddy when we were talking about when the indie game boom was happening with like Microsoft, you know, Xbox Live Arcade and stuff. And, you know, people were all going crazy like, this is a revolution, blah, blah, blah. And about 2 years passed, and he and I were talking. And at one point, his name's Nick, and he said, yeah, it's, you know, you have all these stores filled with all these indie games now, especially because they opened up like Steam Greenlight and stuff. And he said, it's just not enough to be interesting anymore. And like, I feel like that is something I've really taken to heart whenever I see like all these games coming out. Like, you got to have something more than just, this is an interesting concept, or like, it looks fun. Like, I feel like honestly, like marketing is more important than ever for video games.
Yeah,
like,
it's very true.
Yeah.
And it's tough too, because there's, you know, even in that indie market, which I feel like is bigger than ever, but diminished, right? A little bit, just as like, I don't think the titles are getting quite as much. We could argue, you know, back and forth on various titles that have done spectacularly there, but I see games all the time that someone will mention in passing on Twitter or in a meeting that we have, and we'll just go, oh yeah, it sounds cool. I remember I got to play it.
Yeah, it sounds neat. We'll never play it just because, again, resources.
Yeah, resources. You just never, it never comes back around, and you're just like, what was the name of that game? Well, I don't even remember the name anymore.
Like, honestly, I feel a lot of the time, unless I'm looking for like a small indie game to write for the virtual life, A lot of the time, I will not play a game that's like sort of on the fringes until it becomes not on the fringes, like Stardew Valley or PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds. Like, I didn't touch those games until they were inescapable.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I feel like, honestly, sometimes that's what has to happen with an indie game. Like, you are either out there and inescapable or you don't exist.
Yeah.
Right? It's because you drown. There's just a sea of indie games literally every day. You just drown in it, man.
Thank you so much for watching this excerpt from the Game Informer Show podcast. You can subscribe to the audio version and listen to new episodes airing every Thursday. We cover big games on the horizon, games that we've just reviewed. We have long-form developer interviews, a lot of fun stuff. So check it out every Thursday.